Hi, my name's Steve Bowens. I'm here to talk to you about visiting the beach as part of the Your Shore Beach Rangers project. I am going to be doing 3 little mini videos. So this first one really is about things to think about before you go to the beach, considering the conditions, where you're going to go, which beach you're going to choose, or a bit of coastline. The next bit will be when you get down to the beach, things to look for on the beach and in the water to make sure you can have a safe and fun time. And then finally, the last little video is what to do whenever you come back again. So I've got a little PowerPoint just to help us through this first bit. Okay, so there's 2 things to consider here really, is that either you have a specific time that's available to go to the beach, and that's the condition, that's the situation with me today. I've got between 11 and 12 o'clock today is my only time available to get down and get in the water. And what I want to do today is I want to decide what's the best beach to go to and what are the conditions likely to be like when I get down there. I'd really like to go snorkeling today. It's a really warm, sunny day, and there's been lots of things in the water that would be really interesting to go and have a look at, but I don't know really what the forecast is, and I don't know what it's like down the beach. So I need to have a look at it and see what the conditions are likely to be before I go down there. The other situation is that there's something specific that you want to do. So it might be that you want to go swimming and you want to choose the best beach to go to, or you want to go snorkeling and you've got all weekend to do it and you want to choose the best time and the best place to go to. So in either way, these little videos should help with that. So as I say, the first little video is what we need to do before we go. Then the second video will be what we do when we get there, things to look for to keep us safe. And then when we get there or when we come back, things that we might want to think about then. So before we go, we're going to talk a little bit, think about what the tides are doing. We're going to have a look at the weather and if there's any waves and how they might affect us. And that obviously depends on what we're going to be doing. If we want to go to the beach to go surfing, we need waves. If we want to go to the beach snorkeling, then we need flat water really, or swimming, depends what you want to do, but generally we want to have nice flat water for that. We're going to look at which beach we might want to choose, and we want to go to a beach which has got lifeguards on it. We want to think about the effect that waves and the conditions might have on it. We'll talk briefly about equipment that we might carry with us, so a form of communication and some sort of floating aid whilst we're in the water. When we go to the beach, it's really important that we always tell somebody where we're going, what we're doing, what time we're expected to be back, and also what to do if we're late. Okay, so the first thing is about tides. Now, you can get tidal information in lots of different places. If you just type in tides and the name of the beach or the bit of coastline that you go into, the chances are you'll find tide times for that day. So you can get it online, but that tends to only be for about 7 days in advance. So it's great if it's the same week that you're going, but it's not that helpful if you're thinking about planning for 2 or 3 weeks in advance. For that, you might want to get yourself a tide table, and tide tables are little books which give you the tides for the whole year throughout each day, and it gives you the tidal height and the tidal range. So one thing to keep in mind is that this is a tide table for Falmouth, for instance. I live in Portreath, and the tide's not got that much difference between it, but a tide table is for a specific port that you go to. So if you pick up the tide table and you are in Bude, but actually you want to go in the water in Falmouth, you need to know the difference in the time of the tides between those 2 different ports, for instance. So when you open up the tide table, on the inside, there's a list of the other ports, and it will say on there what the difference in time is between the beach that you want to go to, or the port that you're going to, and this one here. So as I look through this, I can see that the difference between the local beach here and Falmouth, which is where this is for, is 5 minutes. So there's only 5 minutes difference between them, so it's not that much really. This is going to be a little bit tricky to see on here, so I'm going to use an online tide table to show you what the information means. So again, there's lots of information available online about tides. This is just a link to Magic Seaweed, which is a surfing website. And for our local beach, for Portreath here, it gives you a range of information. So it says high, low, high, low. So high is the high tide. So that's the tide when it's furthest up the beach. And low is for the low tide. So that's when it's lowest down the beach. And you can see that today, that the high tide is at 5 o'clock in the morning, and that low tide is at just after 11 o'clock. So that's a real pain, because I was hoping to go snorkeling, and actually snorkeling tends to be better whenever the tide's in, because a lot of the rock pools and stuff that are exposed at low tide are then covered in water and full of life. We can go and go and explore those. So straight away I'm thinking, actually this morning maybe snorkeling is not the best thing to do, but we'll see, because there's things further out and deeper that we could go and have a look at. You can see that the height of tide is 6.1 meters, and the height of tide at low tide is 1.6 meters. So what that means is that there's the amount of vertical movement up and down is quite big. So this is like a spring tide. So it's quite a high tide, and it's quite a low tide. Now what that means is there's two types of tidal movements. So the tide, contrary to what you might think, when the tide's coming in, the water isn't coming towards the beach. The tide is actually going left to right. So, but it's getting deeper and shallower. So when we go to the beach, even though the tide is getting deeper, the tide's coming in, it doesn't mean that that water will bring you towards the beach. It just means that it's getting deeper in that little bay. When the tide's coming in, in Cornwall, for instance, then I'll just show you a quick picture. Okay, so on this diagram here, this is a picture of Cornwall. So I live up on the north coast here. And when the tide's coming in, the tide is actually going up towards Bristol Channel, and it's splitting around Land's End, and it's going down along the English Channel towards Southampton and Devonport. So when the tide's coming in, it's actually going this direction. When it's going out, it is going back out towards Land's End. So the tide doesn't like come in and go out, which I know is a little bit confusing. It goes left to right. So today the tide, low tide is at 11 o'clock, which means that if I go down to the beach, there's going to be very little movement left to right. So the tidal movement, now that does change somewhat for specific locations, but as a general principle, at low tide, there's not going to be very much movement left to right. So that's great for going for a swim or for a snorkel. If the tide was, let's say, 3 hours after high tide or 3 hours after low tide, this here tide, this movement gets quite strong. So we would want to be quite careful about anywhere that go swimming or snorkeling because of the risk of any strong tidal movement. The other thing about the tide to keep in mind is that as well as tidal flow, we have a difference in tidal range. So the tidal range is this vertical movement up and down. Now, because we're coming on to spring tides, this tidal range is quite high. So if we look at a picture of a beach, the tide might come right the way up to the top of the beach at high tide, and it may go quite a long way out at low tide. Now that means that there's a risk that if I go down to the beach and it's going to be low tide, I could leave my stuff in an area, go out on the water, maybe be half an hour out in the water, come back, and my stuff's gone because actually the tide's come in and that stuff has floated away. The other thing to keep in mind is that if we're going to go rock pulling, for instance, that we want to be careful when the tide's coming in that we don't get cut off. And when we go down to the beach, we can ask the lifeguards, if we go to a lifeguard patrol beach, about any tidal cut-off areas. And they'll often have a sign up that will show you that as well. So in terms of the tide, we want to know what time high tide is, what time low tide is, and how it might affect us on the beach. So for me today, the great thing is there's very little tidal movement, but unfortunately it's low tide. So for me, I'd rather go snorkeling at high tide. So I need to think about what I'm going to do in terms of that. Okay, so I've checked my tide table. I know the tidal range, how much it's going up and down, and I know the tidal flow. Well, I don't know the tidal flow, but I know that there won't be very much of it because we're actually going in at low tide. So next thing we want to do is we want to think about the forecast. So the weather forecast, we can get a forecast from lots of different places. You can get it online on mobile phones. You can get it in the newspaper. You can get it, but when you get down to the beach as well, the lifeguards will put some basic information about the weather on as well. So they'll tell you the wind direction, strength, and various information. There's a huge number of different online resources you can do to check the forecast. So whatever you use, if you use it on a regular basis, you'll get a better idea of what's good and maybe not so good about it. So for me, I quite like to use the Met Office website. For me, I like the display of it, and it can give you quite a lot of information. So for today, you can see that this morning we've got sunshine, which is good. It's nice and sunny here at the moment. It's fairly warm, 16 degrees, which is great. This area here gives you what it feels like, because if there's wind, it makes it feel a little bit cooler due to wind chill. And then down here, this is quite important when we're going to the beach and on the coastline. This gives the wind direction, which is north-northeast. Now the wind direction, when it says north-northeast, that's the direction the wind is coming from, not going to. So the wind direction is north-northeast, and it's 16 miles an hour with gusts of up to 21 miles an hour. So that's actually quite breezy. It's quite windy, and it's also onshore. It's blowing onto the beach where I'm going. Okay, so you can see this is the beach that I'm going to, Portreath Beach, and the direction of the wind is going to be coming in a northeast direction. So it's going to be coming down this way here, which means that it's quite a strong wind. I'm going to expect there to be some waves on the beach, local short period kind of waves. So we don't know about any like big swell or big waves because we need to have a look for that. But on the beach here, you can see there's a bit of headland sticking out there. That might provide a little bit of shelter from the wind, but actually these headlands, the wind tends to bend around it a bit. So when we get to the beach, the wind is going to be blowing what we call onshore towards the beach. Now that is good in terms of if you were on any sort of craft, that if you had any problems, you'd be blown back to the beach. But it does make it quite choppy and quite difficult. So the other options to have today would be to go paddleboarding or kayaking, but I don't think it's really suitable. With that amount of wind, it's going to be choppy, and it's really hard to paddle in that sort of wind. So one, it wouldn't be a lot of fun, and two, it may not necessarily be safe. I probably wouldn't get off the beach, to be honest. So it looks like snorkeling's out, and it looks like paddleboarding and kayaking is out. So it might be good for surfing, or it might be good for swimming. So we'll just have a wee look. Next thing I want to do is I want to have a look at the surf forecast. So going back to, again, there's a range of different forecasts available, but Magic Seaweed is the one that I tend to use the most. And this is the forecast for today for our local beach. This, when you look at it initially, may look a bit confusing, but there's some quite useful information. So this is the day, that's got the date up there for today. And we're looking at between kind of 9 o'clock and midday. And you can see that the wave size is 2 to 3 foot. So there are waves today. So it's absolutely not suitable for going paddleboarding or kayaking. The swell rating, this gives you an indication of the size and the quality of the waves. So you can see it's saying it's only 1 star and it's not filled in. So the number of stars that are filled in give you an indication of the size of the waves. And then if they're dark, that means that they're good quality waves. But as you can see, this isn't filled in. It's not very good quality waves. These other bits here, these are the primary swell is you can get waves coming from more than one place, so more than one weather system. And the one that's mostly affecting us is this one here. This is the direction of the swell. So the waves are going westerly, which I know, again, may seem a bit confusing, but waves don't always go the same direction as the wind. So the waves are going west. They're going to come straight onto the beach pretty much, which is good. And they're 2.5 foot. So they go up and down 2.5 foot. and the period is 8 seconds. So there's a wave coming about every 8 seconds. We can double check our forecast on here to see if it's similar to this. And this is pretty similar. It's saying it's 15 to 22 miles an hour, and it's a northeasterly direction. So this is quite nice. It gives you an arrow showing you the direction of the wind. And it's red because actually it's strong enough to make the surf not very good quality. It's nice and sunny, and it's fairly warm. So it looks like paddleboarding is out, kayaking is out, snorkeling is out, and surfing is out. So it looks like probably the best thing to do, because I'm restricted in when I can go, is to go for a swim. It's a lovely sunny day. The other thing is I want to double check to see if there are any lifeguards at the beach. So we can do that online as well. Okay, so I've clicked onto the RNLI website, and I just Googled find my nearest lifeguard beach. And on the RNLI website, they have a list of all the beaches that currently have lifeguards on them. And as we scroll through, we can find our beach. So let's have a quick look here. Okay, there we are, Portreath Beach. We click on it. It will give us some more information about that beach. So it gives us the tide for, gives us the weather, which looks quite different. So that's interesting that the information on here is out of date by the looks of things. But it does give us information about some general safety advice, and it shows us the beach that we're going to. So that's great. We've got, we know what the weather is, we know what the tide's doing, we know what the waves are doing, we know that there is lifeguards at the beach that we're going to go to, and we always want to choose to go to a lifeguard patrol beach. So the next thing we need to do is have a little think about what equipment we might take with us. Right. Okay, it's a nice hot sunny day, so sun cream is really important, and the higher the factor, the better. So sort of factor 50 is really appropriate, especially around the face. We're going to get lots of sun, and if you can, then waterproof sun cream is great. But don't forget that if you're actually in the water swimming and splashing around, that will wash off quite quickly. So you need to keep reapplying it. We need some sort of floating aid. Now I'm thinking about going swimming now. If I was going kayaking or paddleboarding, I would have a life jacket or a buoyancy aid on, and I would have, certainly for paddleboarding, I'd have a leash attached to me, which keeps me attached to the board. But thinking about going swimming now, I'm going to take one of these. So this is a pull buoy, and we can use this. It's really, really useful for a number of reasons. It keeps us really visible in the water. So if we're out swimming, and we'll go with friends when we're in the water, but it makes us really obvious and really easy to see. Orange is not a very natural color, so it tends to stick out quite well in the water. We also have, it's also a dry bag. So whilst I've inflated it, I can actually put a few bits and pieces in the bag, which we're going to talk about now in a minute. Once we've got our stuff in there, we just roll it up. Roll it 2 or 3 times, and then clip it together. And then this here can clip around our waist, and we're good to go. Other things to think about is, depending on what it is that we're doing at the coast, we need to have some form of communication with this. The easiest, simplest one is a mobile phone, and that can go in the dry bag. However, my phone, if it gets wet, is not going to work. So along with the phone, we need a little waterproof case. And, you know, it's like anything, you can get different types of these. And you can spend a lot of money on them, or you can get really cheap ones, but whatever it is, it needs to be effective. So I'm just going to pop my phone into this little dry bag, and it's quite simple. It just clips. It's got 3 little waterproof strips on it. Seal those up, and then it folds over 1, 2 times, and then the Velcro does it up. And that I'm going to pop into my dry bag, so I have a means of communication. Now, with these float buoys, these bags, sometimes there's a little separate attachment on the top there, so you can put bits and pieces in there as well. Other things you might want to consider. If I was going kayaking or paddleboarding and I'd have a pocket on my buoyancy aid, I would also think about taking a VHF radio. A VHF radio is really useful because on a mobile phone, I can call the emergency services if I had to, or I can call home, I can call my wife, and that can be really useful. However, the advantage of a VHF radio is that this will broadcast. So it might be that if I was in difficulty or needed help, there could be a boat within sight that could actually help me, but I don't know their phone number. However, VHF radio works by broadcasting, and commercial vessels on the water will be listening to channel 16. So when you have a VHF radio, in an emergency, you can call, or you can make a distress call on channel 16 on a VHF radio. So really useful bit of equipment if you're going to be going on the water, maybe a little bit further from the beach, as I say, paddleboarding, kayaking, things like that. If you're using a VHF radio, you really should go and get some training, and you need to have a license to use a VHF radio for normal everyday communication. The other thing that you might want to think about taking is to make yourself really obvious if anything went wrong. And for that, I use a flare. So again, this I can pop into my little dry bag, which I'll be towing with me anyway. This is a double flare. It's a day-night flare. So one end has whenever you set it off, one end will be an orange smoke, which is daytime, and the other one will be a red flare, which is for nighttime. So the orange smoke, it lets out lots and lots of smoke, so it's really obvious where you are, and it also gives an idea of what the wind directions is at sea level, if, for instance, there's a helicopter is looking for you. So I've got myself a mobile phone, I've got a VHF radio, and I've got a smoke flare. And you may decide to only take one of those things, but you need to think about where you're going, what you're doing, and what is going to be the most effective means of communication. I've got another piece of equipment here, which is maybe a little bit more specialist, I guess, but I certainly use it for kayaking and paddleboarding, and it's called a PLB, or Personal Locator Beacon. So as you can see, it's really small. It'll fit in the pocket of my buoyancy aid, and the great thing about this is that you have to register it, and you can do that free online, and it gets registered using an online form. Then if you have any problems, you can press and hold the red button. There's different designs of these, so you need to read and be familiar with the instructions. This one has a little aerial that pulls out the side. Press and hold that, and it sends a little bit of information, which is picked up by a satellite, which will give you your location and the registration number of the PLB. That will flash up down here in Falmouth Coast Guard, and it will give the registration number and the location and the fact that it has been set off. So it's really important this is registered, because if you don't register it, then that's all they have. They don't have any more information. When you register, they'll ask you for all sorts of information, like the sort of boat that you would be using, contact phone numbers, etc., etc. So they can go through the process of checking that information before they might actually go and allocate resources, because occasionally they get set off by accident. Okay, so I know where I'm going. I've got a good idea what I'm going to be doing. Oh, the other thing in terms of equipment is I'm going to be going in the water, so I'm going to use a wetsuit. A wetsuit is really useful because when I go into the water, whether I'm snorkeling or swimming or whatever it is I'm doing, I'll be able to stay in the water for a lot longer, and it also makes me more floaty, so it's actually easier to swim. And if I had any difficulty or whatever, I can float on my back fairly easily in the wetsuit. Now, wetsuits come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. This is my swimming wetsuit, and you can see it's really shiny. It's a great, comfortable wetsuit to use, but it's not great around the rocks, because this here will snag on rocks and anything sharp. So if you're if you're trying to choose what wetsuit is the best one for you, you should go to your local surf shop or your local dive shop or your local triathlon multi-sport shop, and they'll be able to give you advice of what sort of wetsuit to get. Do go to your local shop and get the information from them and buy from them, because they'll be able to support you through that. I wouldn't advise buying one online because it's really difficult to get one that's the right size. And if you're not sure of exactly what design of wetsuit you want, there's quite a big variety. So it's best to go and get some advice about that. Okay, so we've got all the equipment ready to go. Last thing we need to do is we need to tell somebody where we're going, when we're going to be back, and what to do if we're late. So I'm heading down to the beach. I'm going to let somebody know that I'm going to Portreath Beach, that I'm going to be going, I'm intending to go swimming if the weather's, if the conditions are suitable, and I expect to be back by 12 o'clock. And I'm also going to say, if I'm 10 minutes late, give me a ring on my mobile phone. And then it might be that if they can't get me on the mobile phone, I would then ask them to call the Coast Guard, because an emergency, all search and rescue emergencies are coordinated by the Coast Guard. Okay, so I'm ready to go to the beach. Next little video will be about what we do when we get down to the beach. Thanks very much.